My guy Joseph Quinn just cannot stay away from these demogorgons. So I'm talking about A Quiet Place. If you've watched Stranger Things, then you understand the demogorgon reference. But as I stated, this movie stars Joseph Quinn as well as Lupita Nyong'o. A Quiet Place is basically about aliens that have come to Earth. They have super hearing. I mean, ridiculous hearing. They're also very fast. I don't know what type of animal I would compare them to. They're built like sloths. They can't see. Apparently they can't smell either. They're super fast, super strong. They can climb, all of that good stuff. But they're the main thing about them that makes them worth being afraid of is that they hear incredibly well. Hence the name A Quiet Place. So basically, again, day one takes place in New York City, showing us basically how did things take place as soon as the aliens touched down. What did that look like? Again, if you've seen the other installments, you remember that in part two, at the beginning of part two, they kind of gave us a little bit of some day one vibes. The kids were at the baseball game and we were able to see the, I don't know, pods or whatever start falling. And then as they left the baseball game, we start to see the aliens kind of snatching people off the streets. Again, this is in part two, which I remember when part two first came out, I actually thought that part two was going to be a prequel just because of how it started. Because, of course, we know John Krasinski's character died in part one. So here we are, third installment in. But again, it's a proper prequel. Right off the bat, the first thing that I noticed about this film is that it was extremely loud in the beginning. There's a little message that this is not really a spoiler. There's a little message that plays across the screen at the very beginning. It says that New York City is a constant about 90 decibels, which is about the same volume as a steady scream. As a person just screaming nonstop is about the noise level of New York City, which really did set the scene for the events that took place following. Lupita and Joseph both did phenomenally well. I mean, their performances were great. We already know that Joseph can do horror based on the Stranger Things. We already know that Lupita is great at horror from Jordan Peele's movie Us. Her facial expressions are everything. I mean, she can make the most subtle face and give us so much fear out of one little look. So fantastic. She sold it. I mean, I won't say she carried it. No, she didn't carry it because everybody's performance was great. I'm probably going to butcher his name. I always call him Djimon Hounsou. I think I heard someone pronounce it Djimon, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. He was Shazam, not he was the wizard, not the actual Shazam. He's been Never Back Down. That dude's resume is a mile long, so let's just not go down that road. But he's here. I mean, underused, small role, but I loved seeing him again because we got a snippet of him again in part two. So I loved that in the prequel they brought him back, gave him a bit of a bigger role, but it was still relatively small compared to the overall movie. Lupita and Joseph characters, their unison, it seemed unlikely. Well, not unison, but their partnership. That's a better word. Their partnership or friendship. It was fairly unlikely, but again, in a situation where there's just purely chaos and randomness going on, I can see you making some very unlikely friends that you might not normally make. He joins her on this random quest that she has to get from point A to point B. I won't tell you what that is because that's a spoiler, but I will say it's ridiculous. Her quest is ridiculous and unbelievable based on the circumstance. They do explain her motives for this random side quest. However, it just wasn't believable, right? I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that in most movies I imagine myself in that situation, regardless of what it is, right? That's a part of how you become invested in the story and in what's going on. You think about yourself and your friends, family, and loved ones in those situations. I can assure you that if random aliens came down and started massacring everybody, I would not be taking random side quests for no reason. But I digress. My least favorite thing about this series so far is that we don't yet know where or why as far as the aliens are concerned. Now, they are extremely unapproachable, right? So there's no way to really learn that motive from them. But this is just one of those tough stories to have. This is one of those hard things to do because either you're going to have to be very creative with figuring out how to let the audience know where they came from, or either we're never going to know. There's no in between there because, again, these are not creatures that you can reason with. They're not creatures that you can communicate with at all. They make these kind of echolocation-ish sounds. Seems like that's how they, among squealing and squelching and screaming and whatnot, is kind of how they communicate with each other. But they very clearly use some form of echolocation to get around. But any small noise that isn't overshadowed by a much larger noise like rain or something like that, they're going to hear you and come kill you. It's not yet apparent how far off they can hear certain sounds, but even in part 2, I don't think in part 1, or part 1 as well. In each film, they gave you a very close up, very detailed look at how their ears receive sound. Again, we don't know the specifics of how it works, but if you can see, then you can see how complex their hearing system is. One thing that I would like to see in future installments, if there is going to be a future installment, I would love to see humans taking the world back. How are we taking the world back? Because in part 2, we learned that 1, they cannot swim, and 2, like a constant high frequency, high pitched sound, it disorients them and it suspends them. They can't move. They can't go anywhere. I mean, not like paralysis. They can move, but that movement is basically them being stuck in place and panicking at how loud the noise is. So we have 2 weapons. Well, yeah, essentially we have 2 weapons that we can use against them. In part 2, the little girl took her hearing aid that would emit this high frequency sound, and she could plug it up to like an amplifier, and that would stop them long enough for you to shoot them in the face and kill them. So with that knowledge, I would love to see. So we've had 2 middle films. We've had the prequel. I would love to see the final installment in the saga with us taking the world back, right? I mean, I'm sure the army could reproduce like some massive amplifier that would just constantly play nonstop and just roam around looking for them, and wherever you see them at, suspended and shocked, take them down. So that's something I would like to see next. But so far, yet again, as the first and second movies, they're not really diving into any kind of origin story about them. It's just more of the same. One thing I'll say about this one in comparison to the other 2 is that it feels very random. In part 1, and I understand that that's more than likely because it's day 1, right? So you can imagine a lot of random things are going to happen on day 1. There's no norms. Like nobody knows what it is that really sets them off. Most people when something scary is going on, you immediately get quiet so you're not discovered, right? So simply because people were quiet, it doesn't tell us that they knew how dangerous sound really was. It doesn't tell us that. It just tells us that they were scared, right? So it was just random. In part one, we have an established family who pretty much knows the drill. They know the do's, they know the don'ts, and they live by that. In part two, there's a journey. You have the family who the home that they had made safe and secure is no longer safe and secure. And so now they have to travel from where they were to a place that's supposedly safe, is what part two is about. Part three, or the prequel, is just random. By design, maybe, but you feel it. You feel the randomness of it. To me, it's mainly because of Lupita's side quest. Because she's very detached from the main story, in my opinion. She's very detached because she's kind of just wanting to do her own thing. And then Joseph Quinn's character shows up and not necessarily throws a wrench in what she's doing because she's still determined to complete this side quest. But we have to get about 3/4 into the film till we figure out what she's actually going to do. I'm not a fan of the randomness of it. And I've said that like 150 times, but that's how I feel about that. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Definitely be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you want to see more reviews. My reviews are done in a very chill fashion, right? Very, very relaxed, very cool. I'm not a film critic. I do have a bachelor's degree in digital cinematography, so film is what I love. It's what I do. But I do these reviews for fun. I love movies. I watch movies and TV shows all day long. So again, if you want to see more, definitely like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you can be aware when I drop the next one. I think the next one is going to be Maxine, if I'm not mistaken, in a couple of weeks. So be sure to tune in for that. See y'all next time.